The Great Hall of Prime was the largest building in the galaxy. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds formed inside it. 847 species sat in their designated sections, their bodies of every shape and size filling the massive chamber. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had no solid form at all. They had gathered here for thousands of years to decide the fate of worlds. In a small corner near the back, the human delegation sat quietly. There were only 12 of them. Humanity had joined the Galactic Assembly just 50 years ago, and they were still considered children among these ancient races. Ambassador sat in the center of their group. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent 30 years building relationships with alien species, learning their languages and earning their trust. Or so she had believed. Beside her sat Admiral. He was Earth's military representative to the Assembly. His job was simple. He watched. He listened. He reported back to Earth about any threats. Today, something felt wrong. The other species were not looking at the humans. They were looking away. Even the ambassador, who had always been friendly, kept his 6 eyes fixed on the floor. The Speaker of the Assembly floated to the central platform. His name was, and he belonged to the race. They had pale skin that was almost transparent. You could see their blue blood moving beneath the surface. They had ruled the Assembly for 3,000 years. They believed they were better than everyone else, and most species agreed with them. Raised his thin arms for silence, the hall became quiet. "We have gathered today for an important vote," announced. His voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. "The matter concerns the species known as humans from the planet called Earth." Ambassador leaned forward. This was not on the schedule. She looked at Admiral. He shook his head slowly. He did not know what was happening either. "Humans are a young species," continued. "They breed quickly. They adapt to harsh conditions. They require little food and water compared to their work output. These qualities make them valuable." He paused and smiled. It was not a kind smile. "The Assembly has received proposals from 47 member species requesting access to human labor." The words hung in the air. Ambassador felt her blood turn cold. "Therefore," said, "I present Resolution 7741. Earth will be designated a labor resource world. All humans will be registered as Assembly property. They will be distributed according to the needs of member species. Breeding programs will ensure a steady supply of workers for the next 10,000 years." The chamber erupted in sounds of approval. Clicking, humming, roaring. The aliens were pleased. Ambassador stood up. Her legs were shaking, but her voice was steady. "This is slavery. The Assembly Charter forbids the enslavement of sentient species." Looked at her the way a person looks at an insect. "The Charter protects member species in good standing. Humanity has been reclassified. You are no longer members. You are resources." He turned to the Assembly. "Let us vote." One by one, the species voted yes. A race of giant warriors voted yes. They wanted humans for their arena fights. The voted yes. They needed workers for their factories. The voted yes. They wanted human servants for their pleasure palaces. Even the species that had seemed friendly voted yes. Not one voice spoke against it. 847 species. 847 votes for human slavery. When the vote was complete, turned back to the human delegation. "You should feel honored. Your species now has purpose. You will serve the galaxy." Admiral stood up slowly. He was an old soldier. He had seen many things in his life, but he had never felt rage like this. "You have made a mistake," he said quietly. The chamber laughed. The sound was like thunder. "What will you do, human?" asked. "Your species has no fleet, no weapons, no allies. You are alone in a galaxy that has decided your fate. Accept it." Ambassador gathered the delegation. They walked toward the exit in silence. Every alien they passed looked at them with contempt or amusement or hunger. As they reached the great doors, turned back one final time. "Remember this day," she said. Her voice carried across the silent chamber. Remember that you voted for this, because one day you will answer for it." The doors closed behind them. 3 hours later, the blockade began. 200 galactic enforcement ships surrounded Earth. They were massive vessels, each one capable of destroying a continent. General Park watched them from the Orbital Defense Command Center. She was a tall woman with short black hair and a scar across her left cheek. She had commanded Earth's defense forces for 15 years. In all that time, she had never fired a shot in anger. That was about to change. Her communication screen flickered. Ambassador's face appeared. She was on a transport ship being escorted back to Earth as a prisoner. General said, "They voted to enslave us, all of them." General Park nodded slowly. "I know, we intercepted the transmission." "What do we do?" The general looked at the alien ships surrounding her planet. She thought about her daughter, who was 7 years old and loved to draw pictures of spaceships. She thought about her mother, who still tended a small garden inn. She thought about every human being on Earth, all 11 billion of them, and what the aliens planned to do to them. "We fight," General Park said. "We cannot win," replied. "They have 800 species, thousands of fleets, millions of ships." "I know." General Park turned off the communication screen. She activated the Global Defense Network and sent a single message to every military commander on Earth. The message was short. It contained only 4 words. "Prepare for total war." Outside, the alien ships began their descent. They expected to find a frightened population ready to submit. They expected humans to beg for mercy, to accept their chains, to become the obedient slaves the galaxy had voted for. They would find something very different. In the depths of the Himalayas, a massive door that had been sealed for decades began to open. In the deserts of Africa, bunkers that appeared on no map activated their systems. In the oceans, submarines carrying weapons that had been forbidden by old treaties powered up their reactors. Humanity had always known that the galaxy was dangerous. They had hoped for peace. They had prepared for war. The aliens wanted slaves. They were about to get a war that would shake the foundations of their civilization. And in the Great Hall of Prime, the celebration continued. The aliens laughed and congratulated themselves on their clever vote. They had no idea that they had just awakened something ancient and terrible. They had awakened the fury of a species that had spent its entire history fighting for survival. They had awakened humanity. The processing ships came down like metal rain. They landed in every major city on Earth: Seoul, Tokyo, New York, London, Cairo. The aliens did not ask permission. They did not negotiate. They simply took what they wanted. Captain Shin watched from the ruins of a building inn. He was 32 years old. 3 days ago, he had been a normal military officer with a normal life. Now his city was burning and his sister was gone. The soldiers moved through the streets with scanning devices. They sorted humans into categories. Strong adults went to the mining ships. Healthy women went to the breeding facilities. Children went to training camps where they would learn to serve. The old and the sick were left behind. They were not useful. Had seen them take his sister. She was a doctor, 28 years old, with gentle hands and a kind smile. An officer had scanned her and marked her for the spice fields of. The work there was brutal. Most workers did not survive more than 5 years. She had looked back at him as they dragged her away. She did not scream or cry. She just looked at him with eyes that said one thing: do something. Now crouched in the darkness with 11 other soldiers. They were all that remained of his unit. Everyone else was dead or captured. "What do we do, Captain?" asked Sergeant Bay. She was young, barely 23, but she had killed 6 alien soldiers in the last 2 days. Looked at his team. They had 3 rifles, 2 grenades, and a knife. The aliens had plasma cannons, energy shields, and orbital support. By any logical measure, resistance was suicide. "We fight," he said. The resistance began small. A supply truck destroyed here, a patrol ambushed there. The aliens did not take it seriously at first. Humans were supposed to be weak. Humans were supposed to submit, but the attacks continued. They grew larger. They grew bolder. In the mountains of Korea, Cell connected with others. They shared weapons, information, and hope. A network formed. It spread across the country, then across the continent, then across the world. Humans who had never met each other began working together. They had one common enemy. They had one common goal. Freedom. Professor Iam was a scientist before the invasion. He had studied alien technology for the Earth government, trying to understand how it worked. Now he worked in a hidden laboratory beneath the streets of. His team took apart captured alien weapons and figured out how to make them better. Their plasma rifles have a flaw, explained to the resistance leaders. The power cells overheat after sustained fire. We can modify our old ballistic weapons to exploit this. Hit them fast, make them fire wildly, then attack when their weapons fail. It worked. Human soldiers began winning small battles. Each victory brought more weapons, more supplies, more hope. Commander O led the largest resistance group in Seoul. She had been a school teacher before the invasion. She had taught history to children, telling them stories of human courage and sacrifice. Now she taught a different kind of lesson. The aliens think we are animals, she told her fighters. They think we will break. They think we will bow. They do not know us. They do not know what we have survived. Ice ages, plagues, world wars, we are still here. We will always be here. Her fighters loved her. They would follow her into any battle. The Galactic Assembly grew frustrated. Earth was supposed to be within weeks. Instead, the occupation was costing them ships, soldiers, and money. They sent to end the rebellion. They were the most feared warriors in the galaxy. They stood 3 meters tall with 4 arms and skin like stone. They had crushed rebellions on 100 worlds. Their general, a massive creature named, promised to break humanity in one rotation of their planet. Landed with 10,000 warriors, they marched into Seoul expecting easy victory. They found hell instead. Commander O had prepared for them. The streets were rigged with explosives. Buildings were turned into kill zones. Human snipers waited on every rooftop. The Battle of Seoul lasted 47 days. They had superior weapons and strength. The humans had superior knowledge of their own city and a complete refusal to surrender. For every human that fell, 2 more took their place. Old men who could barely walk picked up rifles. Teenagers made bombs from kitchen supplies. Mothers fought beside their sons. On the 48th day, General led a charge into the human headquarters. He expected to find Commander O and kill her himself. He found a trap instead. The building collapsed on top of him, killing him and 300 of his best warriors. His head was recovered from the rubble. Commander O mounted it on a spike in the city center. She broadcast a message to the galaxy. Her face was covered in blood and dust. Her voice was calm. My name is O. I was a teacher. Now I am something else. You came to our world. You tried to put chains on our children. You failed. General is dead. His army is broken, and we are just getting started. She leaned closer to the camera. Every species that voted for our slavery should watch this message carefully. We know your names. We know your worlds, and we are coming for you. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. We will come. And when we do, you will understand what you created. The message spread across the galaxy. The assembly tried to suppress it, but it was everywhere. Other enslaved species watched it in secret. They saw something they had never seen before. They saw masters who could be beaten. On Earth, the resistance grew stronger. Captain Shin became a legend. He freed 3 slave ships, returning thousands of humans to their families. Professor Iam built weapons that made alien technology look primitive. Commander O trained an army of fighters who feared nothing. The aliens controlled the skies. They controlled the seas. They controlled the cities during the day, but they never controlled the people. Every night humans struck back. Every night aliens died. Every night the chains grew weaker. Ambassador had escaped capture during the early chaos. She hid in the mountains, coordinating with resistance groups, gathering intelligence. She learned something important. Not all alien species were happy with the Assembly's decision. Some had been slaves themselves long ago. Some remembered their own chains. She began reaching out to them in secret. She planted seeds of alliance. She waited for them to grow. 2 years after the invasion, Earth was supposed to be broken. Instead, it was a fortress of rage and determination. The Assembly had expected grateful slaves. They had received an enemy that would never stop fighting. And deep beneath the Himalayas, Admiral watched the construction of something that would change everything. Stolen technology, captured materials, human engineering. A fleet was being born in the darkness. The chains had not held. They had only made humanity stronger, and soon the galaxy would learn what that strength could do. The facility had no name. It appeared on no map. It existed in the deepest part of the Himalayan mountains, carved into rock that was millions of years old. Only a handful of people knew about it. To everyone else, it was simply a myth, a story that resistance fighters whispered to each other in the dark. Admiral walked through the massive underground hangar. Above him, stretching for kilometers, was humanity's greatest secret. Ships, hundreds of them, built in silence over 5 years while the galaxy believed Earth was dying. Admiral, Vice Admiral approached him, was a thin man with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death. His wife and 2 children had been taken on the first day of the invasion. He had spent every moment since then preparing for revenge. The final ship is complete. Looked at the vessel. It was massive, larger than anything humans had ever built. Its hull was black, designed to absorb sensor scans. Its weapons were a mixture of stolen alien technology and human improvements. They had taken what the galaxy had created and made it better. "What did you name it?" asked. His face was hard. The Unconquered. The fleet had been built with stolen materials, captured technology, and human determination. Professor IM had led the engineering teams. They had taken apart alien ships piece by piece, learned how they worked, and improved every system. The aliens had thousands of years of technological development. Humans had creativity, desperation, and rage. It was enough. 300 ships waited in the darkness. Their crews were survivors, orphans, people who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear. They had trained in secret for years. They had memorized star maps, practiced combat maneuvers, and dreamed of the day they would strike back. That day had come. Liberation Day, the 5th anniversary of the invasion. The aliens expected it to be a day of celebration. They had planned parades on the occupied territories, showing off their human slaves, demonstrating their dominance. They had no idea what was coming. At exactly midnight Earth time, the mountain opened. 300 ships rose into the sky. They moved in perfect formation, engines burning bright against the darkness. Alien patrol ships tried to intercept them. They were destroyed in seconds. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Unconquered. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency. They had waited 5 years for this moment. "All ships report ready," Vice Admiral announced. Nodded, "Target the blockade fleet. Fire at will." The battle lasted 4 hours. The alien blockade had 200 ships. They had superior numbers but inferior tactics. They had never faced an enemy that fought like this. Human ships moved in coordinated waves, concentrating fire on single targets, destroying them before moving to the next. They used asteroids for cover. They faked retreats to draw enemies into traps. They fought with a fury that terrified their opponents. When it was over, 167 alien ships were destroyed. The blockade was broken. Earth was free. But did not stop there. "Set course for," he ordered. was a mining colony 3 star systems away. 200,000 humans worked there in brutal conditions. They dug rare metals from deep underground, working 18-hour shifts with little food or water. Many died each month. They were simply replaced with fresh slaves from Earth. Lieutenant led the ground assault. She was 26 years old, small but fierce. Her parents had been taken to 3 years ago. She had not heard from them since. Her team landed outside the main compound at dawn. The alien guards were not prepared. They expected no resistance. They expected slaves to remain slaves forever. Steam cut through them like fire through paper. When they breached the main processing center, stopped. Her soldiers stopped with her. For a moment, no one could speak. Children, hundreds of them, some as young as 5 years old. They were sorting ore with their tiny hands, their fingers bleeding, their eyes empty. They had been born into slavery. They knew nothing else. A overseer stepped forward. He was fat and well-fed, unlike the starving children around him. "You cannot do this," he said. "These are assembly property. You have no right." Shot him, she did not hesitate. She did not feel regret. "Find the others," she ordered her team. "Free everyone." They found 200,000 humans in the mines of. They found mass graves holding 50,000 more. They found breeding facilities where women were forced to produce more slaves. They found torture chambers where disobedient workers were made into examples. They found parents in a work camp near the southern crater. Her mother recognized her first. She fell to her knees and wept. Her father simply stared, unable to believe that freedom had finally come. The liberation of sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The assembly demanded immediate action, but something unexpected happened. Several species refused to respond. They were an ancient race with 6 eyes and long memories. They had been slaves themselves, thousands of years ago, before they earned their freedom through service to the. They watched the human fleet and remembered their own chains. Their ambassador sent a secret message to Admiral. "We will not fight you. We remember what it means to be property. We will not help make others into what we once were." Other species followed. The who had voted for slavery because they feared the assembly, quietly their ships from human space. The who had wanted human servants suddenly found other priorities. The coalition was cracking. Ambassador worked from a hidden base on a liberated moon. She contacted every species that showed doubt. She promised them something the assembly never had: equality, partnership, a galaxy where no species would be enslaved again. 12 species joined the Liberation Coalition. It was a small number compared to the hundreds that supported the assembly, but it was a beginning. Meanwhile, the human fleet continued its campaign. Captain Shin, now promoted to Commodore, led the liberation of 5 more slave colonies. His sister was found alive but changed. The gentle doctor had become something harder during her years of slavery. She joined the fleet as a medical officer, treating wounded soldiers with the same hands that had once healed civilians. Commander O trained new fighters from the liberated populations. Many of them were not human. They were other species, freed from the same mines and farms, burning with the same rage. "The enemy thinks this is about humanity," told them. "They are wrong. This is about freedom. This is about every species that has ever worn chains. Fight with us and those chains will break forever." They fought, they believed, and slowly the impossible began to seem possible. The assembly had created a monster when they voted to enslave Earth. They had taken a young species and taught it hatred. They had given it a reason to fight. They had united a divided world into a single weapon of vengeance. Now that weapon was loose in the galaxy, and nothing would stop it until the chains were broken everywhere. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Unconquered, watching stars stream past. Somewhere ahead was Prime. Somewhere ahead was the chamber where humanity's fate had been decided. Somewhere ahead was justice. "How long until we reach the assembly?" he asked. 6 years at current speed, replied, but we have much work to do first. Nodded, 6 years. 6 years to free every human. 6 years to build alliances. 6 years to prepare for the final battle. He could wait. Humanity had learned patience in the mines. They had learned it in the breeding camps. They had learned it in the mass graves of their children. They would not forget. They would not forgive. They would not stop. The fleet flew on, carrying hope and fire into the darkness. The war spread like fire across dry grass. What began as a desperate rebellion became something much larger. Human fleets struck targets across 100 star systems. They freed slaves. They destroyed supply lines. They burned the infrastructure that had supported galactic slavery for. Commodore Han became the most feared name in the galaxy. He was 40 years old with a calm voice and cold eyes. Before the invasion, he had been a strategic analyst, spending his days studying alien battle tactics. Now he used that knowledge to destroy them. The Battle of the Corridor made him a legend. Was a critical passage between the inner and outer regions of the galaxy. Control it, and you controlled the movement of fleets and supplies. The Assembly sent 200 warships to hold it. They believed it was. Commodore Han arrived with 40 ships. His officers questioned the plan. The numbers were impossible. They were outnumbered 5-1. But Han had studied them for years. He knew their strengths. More importantly, he knew their weaknesses. They were proud. They believed in direct combat, ship against ship, warrior against warrior. They considered tactics to be a form of cowardice. Han used this against them. He positioned his fleet near a dense asteroid field. They saw what they expected to see. A small enemy force, desperate and afraid, hiding among rocks. They charged forward, eager for glory. Human ships retreated into the asteroids. They followed. Their large warships were not designed for such tight spaces. They bumped against rocks, damaged their hulls, lost formation, and then the humans attacked. Using the asteroids as cover, Han's ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts. They struck from angles they could not defend. They targeted engines and weapon systems. They turned the asteroid field into a graveyard. When the battle ended, 112 ships were destroyed. Han lost 7. They had never known such defeat. Their warriors began to whisper that humans were not natural creatures. They were demons wearing flesh, spirits of vengeance sent to punish the galaxy for its sins. The fear spread. On the diplomatic front, Ambassador worked tirelessly. She traveled to secret meetings on neutral worlds. She spoke to species that had doubts about the Assembly. She made promises and kept them. "We do not want to rule the galaxy," she told them. "We want to free it. Every species that joins us will be treated as an equal partner. Every species that was wronged will receive justice. This is not human conquest. This is liberation." The coalition grew. They provided ancient knowledge of the galaxy's structure, weaknesses in the Assembly's defenses that had been forgotten for centuries. They converted their factories to produce human-designed weapons. They who had once wanted human servants now sent medical ships to heal wounded soldiers of all species. Other groups joined in secret. Slave species that had suffered for generations saw hope for the first time. They sabotaged their masters' ships. They passed information to human intelligence. They waited for the day when they too could fight. General Park, now Supreme Commander of all human forces, planned the final campaign. She had aged during the war. Her hair was completely gray now, and lines of exhaustion marked her face. But her mind was sharper than ever. "We cannot defeat the Assembly through attrition," she explained to her commanders. "They have too many ships, too many resources. We must strike at the heart. We must take Prime." Prime, the capital of the Galactic Assembly, the most heavily defended system in known space. Thousands of ships protected it. Planetary shields covered the surface. Weapon platforms orbited every approach. Taking it was considered impossible. But humans had learned that impossible was just a word. The assault began with deception. Human ships attacked 3 other systems simultaneously, drawing assembly forces away from Prime. Coalition intelligence agents spread false reports about the true target. By the time the assembly realized what was happening, the human fleet was already entering the system. The siege of Prime lasted 3 months. General Park commanded from her flagship, coordinating hundreds of ships in a complex dance of attack and defense. Every day brought new challenges. Assembly reinforcements arrived constantly. Defense platforms had to be destroyed one by one. The planetary shield seemed impenetrable. But humans did not give up. They had learned patience in the slave mines. They had learned determination in the resistance. They had learned that freedom was worth any price. Major led the final ground assault. He was young for such a responsibility, only 34 years old, but he had proven himself in dozens of battles. His unit was called the Unchained, composed entirely of former slaves and their children. They fought with a fury that terrified their enemies. The assault on the assembly chamber was the bloodiest battle of the war. Assembly guards defended every corridor, every room, every staircase. The Unchained pushed through them with grenades, rifles, and bare hands when necessary. When Major finally reached the chamber itself, he found it almost empty. Most of the assembly delegates had fled, but one remained. The speaker sat in his floating chair at the center of the great hall. He was the one who had announced humanity's enslavement 11 years ago. He was the one who had smiled when the galaxy voted to put chains on human children. He was not smiling now. "You cannot do this," said. His voice was shaking. "We are the Assembly. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. We are civilization." Major walked toward him slowly. His armor was covered in blood, some of it his own. His soldiers spread out behind him, their weapons ready. "You sold children into mines," said. "You bred humans like cattle. You worked millions to death for profit." He stopped in front of his chair. "You are not civilization. You are slavers, and your time is over." Was taken alive. The assembly wanted him dead, but humans had different plans. He would stand trial. He would face justice. He would answer for every crime. The news of Prime's fall spread across the galaxy. Species that had supported the assembly scrambled to distance themselves from it. Species that had been neutral rushed to join the coalition. The old order was collapsing. But the war was not over yet. Assembly remnants gathered in the outer regions, planning counterattacks. Species refused to accept defeat. The shamed by their losses vowed to fight to the last warrior. There were still battles to be fought, lives to be lost, sacrifices to be made. Admiral stood on the balcony of the conquered assembly chamber, looking out at the alien city. Fires still burned in some districts. Coalition ships patrolled the skies. Below, prisoners were being processed, their fates to be decided by trials instead of votes. Vice Admiral joined him. "We've received surrender offers from 47 species. More are expected." Nodded, "And the liberation camps?" "Ongoing. We've freed approximately 18 million humans across the galaxy. We estimate another 4 million still in captivity." 18 million freed. 40 million had died during the war. Millions more had died in the camps before that. The numbers were beyond comprehension, but each number was a person. Each number was someone's child, parent, sibling, friend. "We keep fighting until every human is free," said. "Every single one." And then looked at the stars above Prime, the same stars that had watched humanity be condemned to slavery, the same stars that would now watch its rise to something greater. "Then we build something new, something better, a galaxy where this never happens again." The war continued, but its end was visible now. The assembly was broken, the slavers were running, and humanity, the species that had been called primitive and weak, stood at the center of a new age. They had been given chains. They had forged them into swords, and the galaxy would never be the same. The war lasted 11 years. When the final treaty was signed, the galaxy had changed forever. Old empires had fallen, new alliances had risen, and a species that had been condemned to slavery now stood at the center of it all. The signing ceremony took place aboard the Unconquered. It was fitting. The ship had led humanity's fleet from the first battle to the last. Its hull carried scars from 100 engagements. Its crew had changed many times as soldiers fell and others took their place. But the ship remained, a symbol of everything humanity had survived. Chancellor Shin stood at the podium. Her title was new. Humanity had created it for this moment, for this woman who represented everything they had endured and overcome. Had been a doctor once long ago. Then she had been a slave on the spice fields of. The work had broken her body in ways that could never be fully healed. Her hands trembled slightly. Her lungs struggled with thick air, but her voice was strong. Behind her sat the leaders of the Liberation Coalition. 43 species had joined by the end of the war. Some had been there from the beginning, like thee and the. Others had joined only when victory seemed certain. It did not matter. They were all equals now. Across from them sat the representatives of the defeated assembly. They were few. Most species had fled or been absorbed into the coalition. Only the most stubborn remained, forced to sign a document that ended their power forever. Looked at the assembly hall, filled with creatures of every shape and size. Many of them had voted to enslave her people. Some had owned human slaves personally. Now they sat in silence, waiting for the terms of their defeat. "We did not seek this war," began. Her voice carried across the chamber. 11 years ago, we came to this galaxy as explorers, as learners, as friends. We wanted to find our place among the stars. We wanted to share what we had and learn from what you knew. She paused, letting the words settle. You responded with chains. You looked at us and saw cattle, tools, resources to be used and discarded. You voted, all of you, to enslave every human being. Our children, our elders, our families. You did not hesitate. You did not debate. You simply agreed that we were less than you. The silence in the chamber was complete. No one dared to speak. You were wrong. Gestured to the windows behind her. Outside, human ships patrolled the space around Prime. The same ships that had broken the Assembly's fleets. The same ships that had freed millions of slaves. The same ships that had made the impossible real. We did not win because we were stronger, she continued. We did not win because we were smarter. We won because we refused to accept the fate you chose for us. We won because every human being, from the youngest child to the oldest grandmother, decided that death was better than chains. In the gallery above, Admiral Shin watched his sister speak. His eyes were wet with tears he did not try to hide. Beside him sat the heroes of the war. Commander O, who had held Seoul against the Professor IM, who had turned alien technology into human weapons. Admiral, who had built a fleet from nothing. General Park, who had led them to victory. They had all lost something, family, friends, years of their lives, but they had gained something too, a future, a galaxy, a chance to build something better than what had come before. The new Galactic Compact will establish 3 fundamental principles, announced. First, slavery in any form is forbidden. Any species that practices slavery will be expelled from the compact and face military intervention. The defeated delegates shifted uncomfortably. Many of their economies had been built on slave labor. They would have to find new ways to survive. Second, every species will have equal representation in the new Galactic Council. No species will hold permanent power. Leadership will rotate based on merit and contribution, not age or conquest. This struck at the heart of the old order. They had ruled for simply because they had been first. That advantage was gone forever. Third, species that participated in human enslavement will pay reparations. These payments will go to rebuilding Earth, supporting liberated populations, and ensuring that no victim of slavery is forgotten. The amounts had already been calculated. They were enormous. Entire planetary treasuries would be emptied. Luxury worlds would become work colonies as their populations learned to support themselves honestly for the first time. Some of you will think this is punishment, said. It is not. Punishment would be doing to you what you did to us. Punishment would be putting your children in mines and breeding your women in camps. Punishment would be working your people to death for our profit. She shook her head slowly. We are not you. We do not want slaves. We want partners. We want a galaxy where every species can live with dignity, where no child fears being taken from their family, where no worker dies in darkness for someone else's wealth. She straightened, her voice rising. This is not the end of civilization. This is the beginning of a better one. You can join us or you can fade into history, but you will never again decide the fate of others. That power is gone. It will never return. The treaty was signed. The old assembly was dissolved. The new Galactic Compact came into existence, with Earth as its founding member and humanity as its driving force. Not through conquest, through example. The years that followed were difficult. Old hatreds did not disappear overnight. Some species resented human power. Some resisted the changes. Small rebellions flared and were contained. Criminals tried to restart slave trades and were hunted down mercilessly. But slowly, the galaxy began to heal. Liberation memorials were built on every world where humans had been enslaved. The names of the dead were carved into stone so that they would never be forgotten. Museums documented the horrors of the slave era, ensuring that future generations would know what had happened and why it must never happen again. Human culture spread across the stars. Music, art, literature, food. The species that had once considered humans primitive now eagerly adopted their customs. Human languages became common. Human holidays were celebrated on worlds that had never seen Earth's sun. And humans spread too. Freed from the threat of extinction, they colonized new worlds. They built cities on moons and space stations among asteroids. They had children who grew up knowing nothing of chains, only stories of heroes who had broken them. 20 years after the treaty, Admiral stood on the observation deck of a memorial station orbiting Earth. He was old now, his hair white, his body tired, but his eyes were still sharp. Below him, Earth turned slowly in the void. The planet was healed. Cities that had been destroyed by the invasion were rebuilt. Scars in the landscape were covered by new forests. 11 billion people lived there now, plus millions of aliens who had chosen to make it their home. A young ensign approached him. She was born after the war, part of a generation that had never known slavery. To her, the conflict was history, stories told by grandparents, monuments visited on school trips. Sir, she said, what do we do now? The war is over, the galaxy is at peace. What comes next? Looked at the stars, the same stars that had watched humanity be condemned, the same stars that had watched them rise, the same stars that would watch whatever came after. Now we build, he said, we teach, we make sure this never happens again, he smiled faintly, and we remember. Remember what, sir? Everything, the chains, the mines, the friends we lost, the enemies we defeated. He turned to face her. We remember that peace is not given, it is earned. Every day we must choose to be better than what tried to destroy us. Every day we must choose to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The ensign nodded slowly. She did not fully understand yet. How could she? She had never worn chains. She had never watched her family be taken. She had never fought in a war where survival itself was victory. But one day she would understand. One day she would teach her own children. One day she would stand on this deck and explain to someone young what it had cost to reach the stars as free beings. That was the gift the war had given them. Not just freedom, but the knowledge of how precious freedom was. Not just victory, but the wisdom to use it wisely. Below, Earth continued its endless turn. A world of survivors, a world of warriors, a world that had looked into the abyss of extinction and slavery and refused to blink. The galaxy had voted for humanity's chains. Humanity had voted for the galaxy's future. And now that future was beginning, bright with promise, dark with memory, infinite with possibility. The stars watched. The stars remembered. The stars waited to see what humanity would build with the freedom they had earned. It would be something worth watching. It would be something worth remembering. It would be human.